2025 is finally coming to an end. But you know what isn't coming to an end? A Minecraft update. 2025 was one of the most interesting years for Minecraft's development, as it saw the full start of the brand new drop system for updates. Essentially, instead of having one big update in the summer, Mojang would instead develop several smaller updates to release throughout the year. We saw this begin in 2024, but 2025 was the first full year with drops instead of an update. In this year, we got the Spring to Life drop, Chase the Skies, the Copper Age, and most recently, the Mounts of Mayhem. For each one of these, I created a ranking for every new feature added in the update, except for Mounts of Mayhem. Of the 2025 drops, it appears to be the smallest, purely going based on its feature count. So instead of making a short video dedicated to just that, I thought it'd be fun to instead rank every new Minecraft feature added in 2025 from the worst to the best. If you've seen my previous ranking videos on the drops, my criteria will be the same as normal. This is coming from a Java survival mode perspective, so any item or feature that's exclusive to creative mode won't be counted. Features that are more useful, fun, or interesting will rank higher on the list. Additionally, I'll be combining certain features into the same spot, so sorry if you wanted to see specifically how the iron spear stacks up against the weathered copper bars. You'll just have to settle for how the spears as a whole do against copper bars as a whole. If you saw my original rankings for each of the drops, I'll also do a bit of extra combining for this video. So for example, I originally ranked the dried ghast and happy ghast separately, but I decided to just combine them into one entry this time. A lot of my rankings have also changed a bit since my original videos, as I've gotten more experience using these and have a better understanding of how to use them. So in total, we have a whopping 54 new features to cover today. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. So starting off, of all the new features added to Minecraft in 2025, what do I think is the absolute worst? 54 bat spawning changes. We get to start off with a feature from the brand new drop, and it's one that's just kinda sad. So obviously, bats are some of the most useless mobs in the game. I mean, I doubt you've ever heard anyone say, "I really need a bat, man."
Say that again?
But even if the bat's literal only use is to get some XP and maybe help find some caves, they did have a feature that was somewhat whimsical. I mean, scary! On the dates October 20th through November 3rd, bats would have an increased chance of spawning in higher light levels. This is obviously meant to go with Halloween alongside other Easter eggs like the pumpkin zombies. The holiday Easter eggs are always some of my favorites, as they make the game feel that extra bit more special in that time frame. However, you may be noticing that I'm using past tense when referring to the bats. Yeah, so for some reason Mojang just removed this Easter egg, and now bats spawn the exact same year round. I really don't know why. Granted, of the holiday Easter eggs, this is definitely the smallest, but there just doesn't seem like there was a good reason to cut it. Maybe it was somehow causing issues, but from what I can tell, it just doesn't seem like it was necessary to remove. I'm not going to be actively mad that this is gone because it really doesn't matter, but I don't see any way this isn't the worst thing they did feature-wise this year. Oh yeah, before we move on, I'm sure some of you were also looking at the number and wondering, and why he Urple? For this video, I'm going to color code each number based on the drop the feature is from. Green is Spring to Life, blue is Chase the Skies, orange is the Copper Age, and purple is Mounts of Mayhem. I think in most cases it is pretty obvious which drop a feature is from, but it doesn't hurt to clarify. 53 is Zombified Piglin drop changes. We're going to be in the nerf territory for a little bit. In the Spring to Life drop, Zombified Piglins were changed so that they only drop XP, gold ingots, and gold swords if directly killed by a player. Previously, they would still be able to drop all of those things so long as they were angered towards a player when they died. This is what the most effective gold farms used to run on, so essentially this nerfed their efficiency quite a bit. Now I do kind of understand this choice as gold farms were pretty strong, but it's not like a nerf is going to be a feature I'm excited to see, so it's gotta place low. Also, as you may notice, features from previous drops I'm going to be talking about much more quickly than their original video, so if you want to see me go more in depth on something in particular, you can go watch the original video. 52, Copper Trapdoor crafting recipe change. Due to the addition of copper bars, the copper trapdoor had its recipe completely robbed. So now instead of using 6 copper ingots to craft 2 trapdoors, it takes 4 copper ingots to craft 1. However, if you do a little math, you may notice that the previous recipe actually gave you a trapdoor per 3 ingots instead of 4. Truly the worst nerf in Minecraft history. 51, Copper Horse Armor. Okay, here's our first actual addition to the list. Like the other horse armor, this obviously goes on a horse to protect it from damage. However, compared to iron, gold, and diamond, it does a slightly worse job. Now that would be fine if Copper Horse Armor was craftable, but instead, the only way you can get it is from the same place you get all all the other horse armor, structure chests. Since copper horse armor is now in the pool of possible items to get in structures like dungeons, that makes the other horse armor slightly less likely to spawn. This means that essentially, the copper horse armor is just a nerf, since every time it spawns, it could have been something like iron horse armor instead. I do think of the nerfs this year, it's the least bad, since copper horse armor can at least look cool, but I definitely think it still belongs quite low. 50 splash potion changes. In my original ranking on the Chase the Skies drop, I was a little confused on what this feature meant, but luckily I got it explained a bit more in the comments. It's still lame, don't get your hopes up. Originally, the duration an entity would get from a splash potion was based on the distance from the center of their hitbox to the potion rather than the edge of their hitbox. Now in the case of the player, since the edge of their hitbox is so close to the center, this change really did not make any difference basically at all. If they got hit directly by a splash potion, they would receive pretty much the full effect both before and after the update. But what I failed to realize is that mobs with a bigger hitbox like the Happy Ghast would actually be drastically affected by this change. Since the center of their hitbox is much farther away from the edge, they would be losing a significant amount of time when hit directly by a potion. So this was updated so that splash potions can work better on them. That is very nice, because speed potions are a huge help when moving with the mobs since they are quite slow. Just kidding, Happy Ghast don't get affected by speed. 49 Wolf Sound Variation. On top of the different wolf skins based on the biome, you can now find wolves with different sound effects. There are 7 different personalities, each with their own set of noises. Since each personality can be found in all 9 biome types, there are actually 63 different combinations of skins and sounds you can find for your wolves. I think this was a pretty cute idea to make each wolf feel a little more unique. Unfortunately, some of the sounds are kind of annoying. There would be so many times I'd be walking into my base and then the classic sounds felt way less intrusive, so I'm happy they're still in the game, but it's now a lot harder to find them. Again, I don't think this was a bad addition necessarily, I just haven't really loved any of the other wolf sounds and would rather just go with the classic. 48, carrots can be used to tame, heal, and grow horses, donkeys, and mules. Cool. 47, dead bushes on farmland. You can now place dead bushes, get this, on farmland. I have personally not used this, I don't think I ever will, but I'm sure someone will get some sort of decoration use out of this someday. 46, fallen trees. This is a feature that was previously exclusive to Bedrock Edition that I'm kind of happy to see in Java. In certain biomes, you'll be able to find fallen oak, birch, spruce, and jungle trees. These can spawn with vines and mushrooms, which can help the player get these items in the early game. Really though, it's just a cute bit of world generation, so not really a huge game changer. 45, leather replacing saddles and structures. As we'll see later in the list, after all of these years, saddles finally got a crafting recipe in the Chase the Skies drop. To go with that, instead of finding saddles in many structure chests, you'll now be able to find 1 to 5 leather instead. On average, that comes out to 3, which is the exact amount you need to craft a saddle. Although knowing my luck, I'll probably only get 1. See, I'm so unlucky. With that being said, I like getting leather a lot more since it actually gives you an option on what to make. That's especially the case in the early game because leather can be quite helpful in making books, so I consider this to be a minor buff. 44, music toast and frequency. If you play with music on, you'll now have the option to both change the frequency and also have a toast appear saying the name of each song and who created it. This is just a nice quality of life improvement that doesn't really affect gameplay. Also, I don't usually play with music myself most of the time, so this feature doesn't affect me personally. 43, leaf particles. Before Spring to Life, only the cherry blossom leaves and pale oak leaves would have particle effects falling off of them. I think this added a lot to their respective biomes' aesthetic. Following Spring to Life, falling leaf particles were added to all leaf types, and I think this is a nice way to liven up biomes and maybe even some builds. Again, just a minor aesthetic tweak, but a really solid one. 42, sheep changes. In the Spring to Life drop, cows, pigs, and chickens all got different variations based on a biome's temperature. We'll see them a little later in the list, but unfortunately, the sheep were kinda left out of that. Wait, I said kind of. Instead of getting unique mob skins based on the biome temperature, sheep will instead get different wool colors. While they are the same set of colors across all biomes, the rarity of the colors is different. They were originally planning for new sheep colors to spawn naturally too, but people could not handle seeing a blue sheep. So now, white sheep are the most common in normal biomes, black sheep are the most common in cold biomes, and brown sheep are the most common in warm biomes. I kinda like this change to make each area feel a bit more distinct, but it's obviously not adding anything purely new to the game. Also in Spring to Life, they finally made it so sheared sheep actually have the color of their wool visible instead of just always being white. 41, shear changes. Speaking of shears, this entry contains a lot of their new abilities added in Chase the Skies. They can now be used to remove carpet, horse armor, harnesses, saddles, and leads from mobs. Most of these aren't that useful because you could always just, take them off. but there are some good use cases. Ghast, striders, and pigs don't have inventories to remove their harnesses or saddles, so the shears allow you to get them back without having to resort to murder. Most importantly though is its use with leads. We'll be seeing some more lead changes later on in the list, but shears are incredibly useful for untying mobs from one another. Since shears also work when placed in dispensers, this allows you to automate the process for all of these features, which may end up being helpful for some people. 40. The End Flash. Okay, so you know how I said there wasn't an end update? There was one thing added to the end, though it is purely aesthetic. Every so often, while exploring in the end, there will be a big purple flash that will coat the landscape in purple light. I honestly think this looks really cool and adds a bit to the end's aesthetic while still making it feel both eerie and desolate. I especially like that this is purple light specifically, which to me seems to show that Mojang is working on actually letting us get different colored lighting in the game. Oh, would you look at that, they are. 39. The Locator Bar. I was originally pretty mean to this in the original Chase the Skies video, but I have slightly warmed up to it. Essentially, the Locator Bar will be able to show you how far away you are from other players. This is kinda nice to have in multiplayer and can be sometimes more efficient than giving out coords, though that is definitely still more precise. I also like that you can still hide on the Locator Bar by either crouching or wearing a head. The reason I was a little mean to this before is because I don't like that it replaces the XP bar. It feels a bit weird not being able to see how much more you need to get to the next level. I wish there was a way to turn off the Locator Bar without having to use the game roll, so people can choose whether or not to have it on. Overall though, I think this was a good addition. 38. Camel spawn in deserts. Originally, you could only find these guys in desert villages, but now they just spawn in the whole desert biome. Kinda surprised it wasn't originally like this, but I'm happy it's here now. 37. Bundle spawn in villages. I just think this is a nice addition for new players to help them learn what a bundle is, because it's a very helpful resource, especially in the early game. Making it more accessible without having to find both leather and string is also a great idea to help fit that early game role. 36. The Bush. Finally, we have reached our first new block of the video. Only took 18 other entries. In my opinion, the bush really isn't that exciting. It's very similar to the standard short grass that's been in the game for years. With that being said, this definitely can still be helpful for terraforming, but that's always an aspect of the game that I've kinda sucked at. For that reason, the bush remains a totally forgettable feature for me. Unlike some of the other plants we'll see later, the bush just doesn't do enough different from short grass that makes me think it's an essential building tool. Pretty much anything that uses bushes probably could have just used grass and would basically be the same. 35. Copper Nugget. This one is kind of weird to place because it's basically just a crafting ingredient. No, you can't eat the copper nugget. The copper nugget is used to craft the copper torch, lantern, chains, and ingots. Obviously, those things can be quite helpful, but I feel like it would be a bit weird to place the copper nugget up high just because of that. The main reason I like the copper nugget is because you can get it from smelting copper armor and tools, so in game modes like Skyblock, it can make copper slightly more accessible through mob drops. Still, I doubt anyone in the comments is hyping up the copper nugget as the greatest feature ever, so I think it belongs here on the list. 34. Biome mob variants. In the Spring to Life video, I initially split up the cows, pigs, chickens, and eggs into their own spots on the ranking, but I honestly don't think that's necessary since they're all placed next to each other anyway. As I mentioned earlier in the sheep segment, there are now warm and cold variants for each of these, which makes the biomes feel more distinct. Honestly though, I'm still not very used to them, but that's definitely because I grew up with the originals. At the very least, they're not annoying like some of the new wolf sounds. Overall, this is a great change. I also like that the different chickens lay different colored eggs, which definitely wasn't necessary, but I think it's pretty cool. It gives us just a little more options for decoration, even if it's not a game changer. 33. The Parched. Sticking with biome mob variants, we have our second feature to come from the Mounts of Mayhem. We have seen plenty of skeleton variants over the years, and this is just another one to add to the list. It will spawn in desert biomes and will shoot out weakness arrows towards the player. I've said this before, but I'm also a fan of getting these skeleton and zombie variants to make each biome feel more unique. I think the design is a lot cooler than the passive mob variants, which is what put the Parched on top, alongside it being able to drop its own arrow type. 32. Cartographer changes. A while ago, Mojang started working on a rebalanced villager system which would base some of their trades on the villager's biome. This is most notable in the case of librarians, since you would only be able to get certain books in certain biomes. I like the idea of somebody making a swamp villager specifically for Curse of Vanishing. The librarian changes are still in the works though. For Spring to Life, they instead made the tweaks to the cartographer. On top of the ocean, trial, and woodland maps that all cartographers have a chance to trade, they also get a biome exclusive map. Depending on that villager's biome, it can point to a different village in another biome, a jungle temple, or a witch hut. Essentially, this allows you to easily find all of the biomes that have villager types, which will be extremely helpful when we need these biomes to get certain bugs. Even if a specific cartographer does not have the biome you need, it will be able to point to another village where you can get that biome map. The only reason I'm not placing this higher is because a lot of people just use the locate command or a biome finder with their world seed, but I think having an easier way to find the biomes in the game itself is really nice. 31. Wandering Trader changes. Now instead of just taking emeralds, it can also give the player emeralds with some new trades. A lot of these are actually pretty easy to do, which is nice because there have been plenty of times I've run into a Wandering Trader but didn't have any emeralds to give them. The Wandering Trader did also get a few other new items to give the player, but the highlight is definitely that they can now give emeralds. Unless you really want to be invisible. Ooh, spooky! 30. Creaking name tags and Pale Garden changes. When the Garden Awakens launched, it was definitely a cool drop, but it had a lot of issues. One of the most notable being the size of the Pale Garden, because you could find some that were just... Are you creaking kidding me? But in the Spring to Life drop, the biome size on average was brought up. I still do think there are some that are a little small though, and it's especially annoying when they don't spawn with a creaking heart. I hope they update it again to just make sure it always has at least one heart in a tree. Speaking of the creaking though, the bigger of the two changes has to do with it. Originally, when you named a creaking, it would still die when it turned day. But with this update, named creakings will no longer despawn. This is actually quite nice for specific redstone contraptions, as the creaking can be used to detect if a player is looking in a certain direction. Not something that would be used every day, but can certainly make a machine seem a lot cooler. 29. Netherite Horse Armor. Honestly, I kind of had a hard time placing this one. Unlike the Copper Horse Armor, this is actually an improvement since it's the strongest armor available. The only way to get it is the same way you get everything else netherite, by upgrading it in a smithing table. That makes it quite expensive, and I'm honestly doubtful that price is very worth it. Generally, diamond horse armor is fine, but I guess getting netherite for your horse is a pretty good flex. 28 copper armor and 27 copper tools. Here we have another entry that I feel like I was slightly mean to in the original video. These are obviously new tiers of armor and tools that use copper, but unfortunately they're not that strong. Since copper is more common than iron, it's also weaker than it in every way. A full set of iron armor gives 15 defense points, whereas copper armor only gives 10. This does at least let the player get an armor set slightly earlier, and the tools are more efficient than stone, though they still can't mine diamonds. The reason I don't personally love these is because I really don't think iron is that hard to come by. In the time it takes to smelt all of the copper, I feel like I could find most of the iron I need for a full set. Plus, once I have that iron, these copper features become totally useless for me, so I don't think they have as much impact on the game as many of the upcoming features. With that being said, I still can see some newer players getting some good usage out of these. Plus, my friends and I recently did a speedrun of Minecraft just for fun, and we used copper armor and tools throughout the whole thing, which helped me appreciate the addition slightly more. Also, when I say speedrun, I mean we beat Mumbo's slowness record. We were cheating, by the way. 26. Lead crafting recipe change. Leads used to require a slime ball in order to craft, but this could be somewhat annoying to come by. Once you have a good slime farm, it really isn't a big deal, but especially in the early game, it can be somewhat easy to lack slime balls. Leads are probably the most helpful in the early game too, especially when moving mobs like villagers for trading halls and iron farms. So changing the recipe to only require string, I think was a really nice quality of life change. 25. The saddle crafting recipe. Kind of similar to the last entry, it's really not too hard to find saddles and structures, but since saddles are the most useful in the early game, it makes sense that they should be more accessible. This was probably the most requested crafting recipe for over a decade, so it's nice to see that it's finally made its way into the game. 3 pieces of leather and 1 iron ingot is a perfect price to pay, especially with some of the other mount changes we'll be seeing in a bit. 24. Lodestone crafting recipe change. Alright, final crafting recipe I promise, but of this trilogy, it's certainly the best. Originally, lodestones required 8 chiseled stone bricks and a netherite ingot. Yeah, I would never craft that. Luckily, Mojang realized that price was extremely unreasonable and replaced the netherite ingot with iron. That makes lodestones infinitely more accessible, which is nice for not only using them for their intended purpose, but also for building. It has a very unique texture, so I could see it being used in a lot of different ways, especially for tiled flooring. Lodestones were also made more accessible by spawning in ruined portal chests, but the big change is definitely to the crafting recipe. 23. The cactus flower. This is a plant that can sometimes grow on the top of cacti and just adds a nice bit of color to deserts and desert-related builds. You can even place a flower on the ground instead, though it definitely works best when on top of a cactus. While I don't think this is as flexible to use as some of the other building blocks we haven't seen yet, it's probably the easiest to use, as basically any build with the cactus can have this thrown on top to look even better. Additionally, this can also be used to craft pink dye, which isn't much, but it's nice to have too. 22. Zombie horse jockeys.
I thought you were dead.
My death was greatly exaggerated.
For those of you that don't know the zombie horse lore, he actually isn't a new mob. The zombie horse has been in the game ever since Minecraft 1.6 released in 2013, but has been inaccessible in survival mode for over 12 years. That is until I decided to joke about it in a video. That's of course on top of their variants like donkeys, mules, skeleton horses, and zombie horses. The latter two were creative mode exclusive at the time, but they did eventually get added for survival. Well, at least one of them did. Then they announced the zombie horse less than a month later. You'll find the zombie horse as the brand new zombie horse jockey, which are meant to show off the brand new spear item. They are fairly rare and can only spawn in a few biomes, but they deal a lot of damage. It is a pretty scary encounter, but I think that makes it way cooler, especially because if you kill the zombie on top, you get to keep the zombie horse as a reward. Its stats aren't anything too special compared to the average horse, but it's certainly good enough to make the mob usable. Just make sure to put armor on it, because when it turns day, 21, the Camel Husk. Onto another special jockey encounter, I think this one is even scarier. That's because the camel can have two mobs on top of it, so if you find one, you'll have to face a husk with a spear and a parched. Because of the stronger mobs, the Camel Husk is certainly the scarier encounter, and since it can only be found in deserts, it's a lot rarer too. Just like the zombie horse, if you manage to kill the mobs, you can keep the Camel Husk for yourself. Its stats are the exact same as a regular camel, so for this guy, you don't even have to trade off good stats if you want to aura farm. The only real difference between it and a normal camel is that instead of feeding it cactuses, you have to heal it using a rabbit's foot. Yeah, the Camel Husk is a bit of a weirdo. On top of the better encounter though, there are two other reasons I decided to put the Camel Husk higher than the zombie horse. For one, it is a completely new mob that we didn't have to wait 12 years to get in survival mode. But more importantly, the Camel Husk allows us to play Spooky Camel Drop. 20 new music discs. This year we got 2 new discs in the form of Tears and Lava Chicken. I always like getting new music discs, so I'm really happy they're keeping this up even under the new drop system. The most interesting part about these two is how they have to be obtained. For Tears, you have to complete the Return to Sender advancement and hit a Ghast fireball back into a Ghast. This is already a fun challenge to do in the game normally, so getting an actual reward for it is cool. For Lava Chicken, you have to kill a baby zombie riding a chicken. I specified the baby zombie instead of the whole chicken jockey because if you kill the chicken first, it won't drop the disc. I personally find that one to be pretty annoying, especially because of Sweeping Edge. But of the 2 discs, which one do I like more? Tears is way better. Not only is obtaining it more fun, but I just like the song more as well. Lava Chicken from the movie actually being added to the game is pretty cute though, even if I think I would have preferred the song if the villager part wasn't there. Neither of these two are S tier discs like Creator or Pig Step, but Tears is a solid A tier at least, so I think 20th fits for them on the list. 19, the Spears and the Lunge Enchantment. This is the feature I could see myself changing on the most in the future, but for now, I'm honestly kind of meh on the weapon. They are very unique, where the damage they deal is based on the momentum the user has while running at their target. So basically, the faster you move, the more damage you can deal. That's a pretty solid idea for a new weapon type, and using the Elytra, you can get some insane damage numbers on this thing. They're also pretty easy to craft, only requiring 2 sticks and 1 other resource. But honestly, I kind of find them hard and confusing to use. The hitbox of the attack isn't very clear, and it requires a lot of effort to use effectively. Just as a comparison, I want to look at the mace, which I think did this hard to use design philosophy a whole lot better. That one will deal damage based on how far you fall before hitting something, which is a lot easier to judge than movement speed. Since the mace also just has the same range as a sword while attacking, it makes the hitbox far clearer than the spear. The hard part for the mace comes from the timing, which feels really satisfying when you manage to hit it, and understandable when you miss. The spear, on the other hand, feels kind of random when it does or doesn't hit. Generally, if you start from far enough away, it works fine, but in the mid-range, it really struggles. I just can't think of a time I would rather use the spear over a sword, and since the inventory is already so limited, the spear really has to justify its spot. The mace, while still overall less practical than a sword, is a ton of fun to use, which makes me want to carry it around a whole lot more. There is definitely some fun to be had with the spear, but I really think it requires stuff like the Elytra to get good enough speed to rival the sword. I could be totally off on that though, I certainly need more time with the item to know for sure. One part I do really like, which is definitely carrying it in the ranking, is the Lunge Enchantment. Spears can pretty much be enchanted with everything a sword can, but replace Sweeping Edge with Lunge. This will make the player lunge forward with a huge burst of speed, which is a really fun movement option. It's especially fun when combined with the Elytra. I had a lot of fun running around with this. It does, however, come at the cost of a lot of hunger though, and I really don't think that was necessary. The enchant definitely makes the spear stronger, but I don't get the sense that this would be overpowered if we didn't lose hunger. Regardless, I think lunge could make for some fun parkour courses, though I don't think lunge is quite enough for me to justify having the spear on me at all times. Also, Mojang, if you're listening to this, I did the Bedrock event where I had to kill 5 mobs with a spear in survival mode on December 13th, and I still haven't gotten notified about getting my cape. Are you guys planning on giving that to me still, or did you guys just miss my account? Or maybe I did the event wrong somehow. In that case, maybe you guys should send the completion notifications during the event instead of after, so we don't have to sit here and wonder. I know a ton of people missed out on the copper cape because of this too. If you guys are gonna have limited time rewards, at least give them out to the people who participate. Okay, anyway, moving on, sorry. 18, the wolf painting. Alongside the Lava Chicken music disc, this painting was also added in reference to the Minecraft movie. I think this fits into Minecraft a lot better though, and it's definitely one of my favorite paintings in the game. I have always loved wolves, so I was destined to like this. 17, dry grass. This entry contains both the short and tall variants, which are great for decorating desert settings. As you can probably tell, this basically acts like the sand version of short grass, and since we don't have anything else like this, it's extremely helpful for terraforming. Again, that's an area I don't have much personal experience with, but I think it's pretty easy to see how applicable the dry grass can be for detailing. It's especially nice that they can be bone mealed, so they're easily farmable. 16, lightning rod oxidation. And here we have the first of many new copper building blocks from this year. We've obviously had the lightning rod before the copper age drop, but we could only get it in the base copper color. Now we have 3 extra variations on this really unique shape, and more unique shapes are always appreciated when building. Due to just how many copper blocks were added this year and in recent updates, they all work together to add a ton of variety to the build palette, which in turn makes each of them more useful. The reason I'm putting the lightning rods lowest is just because we already had the original lightning rod before, so technically we are getting less out of this than the other copper entries. Oh, and if you're going to use these, make sure to wax them. 15, copper golem statues. Now I was considering combining this with the copper golem mobs for this list, just like I did with the dried and happy ghast, but I think the copper golem statues add enough on their own to justify being separate. If a copper golem fully oxidizes, it'll freeze in place. From here you have the choice of freeing it, or trapping it for all eternity in a pose of your choosing. These guys look pretty cute and are totally unique from any other blocks in the game. You could choose 4 different poses for them to be in as well, which adds some nice variety. The only reason this isn't higher is just because it's much more specific than the other copper building blocks, which makes me think I'll use it a lot less. It's still definitely really cool, but I think the more flexible options we'll see in a bit are better. 14, copper torch. This item asked the brave question, what if the Minecraft torch was green? I love getting more variety in lighting blocks because I think the green can suit spookier settings better than a normal torch. I also like that the copper torch is brighter than a soul torch, so there are good times to use both. It is just a pretty simple block recolor, but I'm absolutely not complaining about that. I'd honestly be happy to get torch colors for all of the dyes if we can. The only issue I have is really just the fact that we didn't get green fire or green campfires to go with this. That'd be really cool to see. 13, copper bars. These are recolors of the iron bars and all 4 copper variations. Iron bars are a block I personally haven't used a ton of, but I do see a lot of others get use out of them. I'm happy there's finally some new colored bars to go with it, and I think these will turn out to be really helpful when adding depth to copper-based builds, or really just any build in general. I have heard some people complain about the copper bars just being a recolor, which I can understand, but I honestly don't mind how they are right now. 12, lead changes. Hearing that name may make this sound like something that should have been much lower on the list, but trust me, the changes here are pretty huge. Not only has the distance leads can go before snapping been increased, but mobs can now be tied to one another. This is a pretty big change that allows for a lot of things that were not possible before. The most obvious is more effective mob transport, especially with the happy ghast, as we could tie mobs to it and fly them long distances. You can even be more creative with this, like making a full functioning zip line by tying a mob in a minecart to a boat with a pig inside. This is just a really fun feature to mess around with, as it allows for a ton of new technical stuff and quality of life when transporting mobs. Plus, this entry also includes being able to take a lead off of a fence and have it immediately attached into your hand, which is a lot less annoying than the lead snapping off the mob and making you chase it down. 11, horse swimming changes. Okay, this one may be a bit crazy to have this high up, but I legitimately think this is one of the biggest changes in the Mounts of Mayhem drop. Before this update, I pretty much always avoided using horses. Part of that is obviously because elytra are just so much better, but even before I got the item, I would usually just walk on foot. Horses have the potential to be much faster than the players, so why would I just stick to moving by myself? Well, have you ever tried to drown a horse? Well, neither have I, but if I did run into some water on my travels, that would suddenly become a real possibility. Trying to ride a horse in water would previously kick the player off, which meant it was incredibly annoying moving across even a small bit of water. But in Mountain Mayhem, this was finally fixed so you can swim across the water while still riding on your horse. That genuinely makes horses so much more bearable to use, and I actually think I'll use them more in the future. Yes, this is technically just a small tweak, but it's one that I've been waiting on for many, many years. 10. Leaf litter. Ever since the pink petals were added in the cherry grove, Mojang has been adding a lot of these flat blocks that can be placed up to 4 times in a single tile. That makes them extremely customizable, especially since the corner they're placed in is based on where you're looking. Obviously, leaf litter is great for making more interesting and detailed terrain, but there are even more uses outside of that. One of my favorites that I've seen is using it as the edge of a carpet, which makes interiors look a lot better. Leaf litter can also be quite effective as a fuel source. You only smelt half an item per leaf litter, but considering just how fast you're able to collect them, it takes no time at all to get a sufficient amount to cook with. Now, with all of that being said, I do think there is one negative with the item, that being that they make forest biomes look really ugly. I think there's just way too much of it, which may be realistic, but now I don't think forests look as good as they used to. It's definitely not a problem enough to bring this item down too far, but I still thought it was notable. 9. Wildflowers. Just like leaf litter, this is another flat plant that can be placed up to 4 times in one tile. I like this one more because I generally prefer having more colorful blocks, so the white and yellow of the wildflowers really speak to me. Plus, wildflowers can also be used to make yellow dye, which can make this an easy way to farm the color. And on top of that, it doesn't make birch forest, the biome it spawns in, look ugly at all. In fact, I think it adds quite a bit to the aesthetic. So even though it is close, I do think wildflowers beat out leaf litter in the end. 8. The Firefly Bush. And here we made it to the final addition from the Spring to Life drop. I still think this item is really cool as it will emit out firefly particle effects whenever it's in the dark. You'll be able to find the firefly bush near rivers, and you can get more of it just by bone mealing. This can significantly add to the atmosphere of a build, and I definitely still want to implement this in one of my bases eventually. The fact that it's based on the light level the bush is in, and not if it's nighttime outside, is also great as it adds more control for the player. The only criticism I can think of for the item is that the bush itself is a little ugly, but since you still get the particles even if it's hidden, I really don't care. I will say, I have seen this a little less than I thought I would so far, so maybe this is just a potential man situation, but I still think the firefly bush is cool. 7. Copper chains. I love using chains in my build, so finally having more options for chain colors is fantastic. Of course, we get them in every copper variation, and I think these will add a lot of detail to copper related builds. The reason this is much higher than the previous copper blocks is just because I really like chains. 6. Copper lanterns. Very similar reasoning for the chains being so high. I love using lanterns, so the copper variants are also fantastic to see. Lanterns are my favorite lighting block in the game by far, and while I don't like the copper lanterns nearly as much, having these color options are fantastic when the time does come to use them. Pretty much any build using copper can utilize the lanterns, and seeing as there are so many copper building blocks, I think these are going to come up quite often. 5. The Nautilus, Zombie Nautilus, and Nautilus Armor. I think it makes sense to combine all these features together as the best addition from the Mountain Mayhem. When the Nautilus was first revealed, I wasn't initially super excited, but getting a chance to play around with them myself, I quickly realized just how useful these guys will be. As the name of the drop suggests, the Nautilus and Zombie Nautilus can both be used as mounts in the ocean. Not only will that give the player much faster movement, but as long as the player is riding the Nautilus, they'll get the Breath of the Nautilus effect, which will let them breathe underwater. This is incredibly useful for exploring the ocean, which can be very helpful with ocean ruins and shipwrecks. I also like that the Nautilus has the ability to lunge forward, which not only lets you move quicker, but gives you something to press while exploring. The Nautili are also really easy to find and tame, simply requiring pufferfish and a saddle. If you want a zombie Nautilus though, that will take a bit more effort. Like the zombie horse, you'll find them through naturally spawning mounts, but this time with a trident drowned on top. That does make them pretty rare, but in turn, also much more satisfying to flex with. But if flexing is your goal, you can go a little further than that. The Coral Zombie Nautilus with netherite armor is the real goal for this mob. To get a Coral Nautilus, you have to find one of the already rare trident drowned mounts, but specifically in a warm ocean biome. While mechanically it's the same as a normal Zombie Nautilus, the colorful coral-filled shell makes the mob so much more interesting to look at. As for the armor, the only way to get anything for the Nautilus is in buried treasure, ocean ruins, or shipwrecks. In each of those, a diamond piece of Nautilus armor has a 1.1% chance of spawning, making making it exceptionally rare even without the netherite. In order to get that, you'll need to upgrade the diamond nautilus armor using a netherite ingot, just like every other piece of netherite equipment. Is this really that necessary to make? No, not at all, because the nautilus is barely going to be in danger. But if you really want to max out your aura, it's absolutely essential. Even if it is just for fun, I like how much aesthetic stuff they gave to the nautilus. It's easily one of the most helpful additions added in any of these drops, and these extra details really make it feel like a fully fleshed out feature. Oh, the nautilus can also drop its shell. Almost forgot to mention that. 4. The dried and happy Ghast. Here we have the obvious winner of the Chase the Skies drop, as it's pretty much the only major feature of note that wasn't just a change to a different mechanic. The dried Ghast can be obtained in 3 different ways. The main one is finding it at a nether fossil in a soul sand valley, but you can also obtain them renewably through piglin bartering, or by making life with Ghastiers in my evil laboratory. Dried Ghast can be placed down as blocks, which can work as decoration, but the main reason you'll want them is of course for the happy Ghast itself. By putting it in water and waiting about 20 minutes, you'll get a Ghastling that you can eventually ride on top of by making a harness. By the way, I really appreciate that you can make a harness out of any wool color. It helps to distinguish whose Ghast is whose on a multiplayer server. Speaking of multiplayer, the happy Ghast lets you ride with up to 4 people at a time, which can be fun to fly around the world with. If you're by yourself, the happy Ghast is also extremely helpful for building high up off the ground, essentially acting like creative mode flight. You can even stand on top of the happy Ghast and it'll stay still, basically working like a movable platform. Happy Ghasts are also quite useful for mob transportation, as you could tie other mobs to them with leads and safely transport them in the sky. The only issue I have with the happy Ghast is... yeah, they are incredibly slow. Happy Ghast move at an abysmally slow 3.611 blocks per second, which is worse than the player walking speed of 4.317 blocks per second. So unfortunately, long distance transport isn't really its strong suit, but having it around to use in a big build is still definitely useful enough to bring it up this high on the list. 3. The copper chest. And here we finally made it to our last copper block. While I don't think it's as good for decoration as the chain or lantern, this makes up for it in functionality. As the name would suggest, it works just like a chest, allowing you to store your items. We don't really have many options for different container blocks, so getting 4 new colors of chests can help a lot with the build's aesthetic. But of course, the main reason you'll want the copper chest is to work with 2. The copper golem. This is easily the best mob added to Minecraft in recent memory, and it's one that I've already had a ton of fun using. He is our very first mob vote loser to be added to the game after Mojang canceled the vote, and already he blows all of the other winners out of the water. Not only is he just really cute, he has a fantastic use of being an item sorter. Of course, it was already possible to make item sorters using redstone, but the copper golem makes item sorters more accessible for players who don't understand redstone, and in some cases more efficient than the redstone designs. To get a copper golem, you simply have to place a carved pumpkin onto a copper block, which will summon it and a copper chest. Every so often, he'll look inside this copper chest for items, and if he sees one, he'll take it out and try to put it in a nearby regular chest. It can check up to 10 different chests, and if he sees a chest with the same item he's trying to sort, he'll put the item in that chest. If he can't find a chest that already has that item, he can also just put it in an empty chest. That is incredibly simple and straightforward to set up for basically any farm. Want to separate spider eyes and string in a spider farm? Just hook up the farm to a copper chest, set up a couple wood chests with the items inside, and boom, you're basically set. What makes the copper golem possibly even better than redstone is also the fact that they can sort non-stackable items too, which redstone has always struggled to do. As someone who loves building farms in this game, I know that I'm gonna hook this guy up to pretty much everything I make from this point forward. In fact, I would say the addition of the copper golem has made me more excited to build farms just because I want to see how I can use him inside of it. I genuinely think the copper golem is one of the best mobs in the game. Even if a lot of their usage can be replicated with redstone, the copper golem's simplicity and efficiency is really what's bringing him up this far on the list. Plus, I've even seen some builds on Hermitcraft, for example, that use copper golems essentially as NPCs since their movement can be so easily controlled. So I think the copper golem 100% deserves to place up in the top 2. But even with all of that, I couldn't quite give them the #1 spot. Out of all the features added to Minecraft in 2025, there is still one set that I think easily tops the rest. If you saw my Copper Age video, I'm sure you all saw this coming, but if you haven't, well, you really should be able to see what it is now. 1. The shelves. This is one of the best building blocks Minecraft has added in a really long time. Vertical slabs have been one of the most requested features for years, and while shelves aren't quite that, they're certainly still incredibly helpful. Each of the different wood types can make shelves from 6 stripped logs. These are some of the best detailing blocks in the game, adding them to pretty much any wall can add a fantastic sense of depth. I love running them along the top or bottom, as it helps create a really smooth transition from the floor or ceiling to the wall. The shelves also work as great blocks at the ends of pillars or pedestals, which I've been using throughout the video. Pretty much anything vertical trapdoors were useful for in the past, the shelves can also do, but in some cases even better. And this is all before getting to their main functionality as shelves. You can place up to 3 different items into each of the slots, which again can be used to create some incredibly lovely decorations. Whether they are just shelves in a kitchen, or something more creative like fancier pedestals, signs using banners, hello Mario, or even gambling machines. There are so many possibilities for shelves decoration-wise, and I think they are now an essential tool for making pretty much any build. All of that alone was enough to put this at number 1, but the shelves also get a bit of redstone functionality. Not only could you put items inside of shelves with hoppers, but you could also swap out your inventory by activating shelves with a redstone signal. While I definitely think the building use is way more important, I have seen some cool stuff with the redstone, like a food refueling station made by Etho on the Hermitcraft server. So for being one of the absolute best building blocks Minecraft has seen in a really long time, the shelves absolutely deserve to place as the best new addition in 2025. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you love the Iron Nautilus armor specifically and hate me for not bringing it up by name? Let me know in the comments. Sorry that this video took a bit longer than normal to come out. I was recovering a bit from making my big FNAF video and finishing up the semester. By the way, I want to seriously thank you all for the amazing support on that video, but also the channel overall this year. I've been having a lot of fun making videos for you all lately, and I can't wait to work on even more big projects in 2026. Hopefully you all look forward to that. But before I go, I've got to thank my members, being the Ender Kirby, Maidzo2, Stephen Hafner, Mikey711, Bell Slimes, Night Vision 101 PDX, Wilbur, Stephen Hawley, Bleep3454, Knight, Jenny, Mogo Boat, Zach Pro, Triple Double, Fredbear's Diner, Stuffy Ant, Rich229, Jehojim, Linhard von Hevering, Magnuson Larslot, Trifector, Tibby, Mario Master 101, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Blessed Tiger, Wyatt Derpy, Yanni the Duck, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Display Changer, SMA, B Major 2003, Sir Musty, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ungenio TM, CW McCain, Tesseract, JubeTube, Jameson Pageson, Z Frost, Conkanut, Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.